Last week during my class time with Temple Israel high schoolers, which is one of my favorite times of the week, we had a discussion about preparing for the holiday of Passover. Each student shared what she or he and his or her family did or didn't do to get ready for this holiday. And the most memorable comment for me was a young woman who simply said, "We just look in the pantry and we take out everything delicious, and then we're ready for Passover." What she meant was that in order to abide by the dietary restrictions not to eat bread during this Holy Week that's approaching, she and her family take out all the things they love to eat most. Happy holidays from Judaism. You're welcome. The idea, of course, is that to remember the hasty flight of the Israelites from Egypt, a journey that they had to make so quickly, their bread didn't have time to rise. We also eat unleavened, unrisen bread. It's part of the way that we put ourselves in the shoes of those former slaves and find gratitude for the freedom that we all enjoy today. This is a significant Shabbat today because it is the first Shabbat of the month of Nisan, the month during which we celebrate Passover. Because of that, across the world, Jews are reading a special passage from the Torah that has to do with Passover, getting ready for it, celebrating it, remembering it for generations. And one of the instructions we're given in this additional special Torah reading is the reason that this student said we take out everything delicious from the pantry. The instruction is not only not to eat chametz, which is leavened bread, leavened anything, bread that has had time to rise, and that includes all sorts of cakes and cookies and crackers and wonderful things, or any bread product, but to actually rid our houses of this chametz. That Torah passage that's designated for this Shabbat, it's designated on this Shabbat in order to give people time, 2 weeks, to prepare for the completion of this mitzvah. Gordon and Cass will be reading from the regular weekly Torah portion, which is also designated for today, but this is an extra layer on today's service. As time passed, traditions developed that took this mitzvah of removing all the chametz from the house, described in this special Torah reading from Exodus, to a whole new level. That's because our rabbis of old, in their deep reflection on these kinds of practices, were aware that sometimes people drop crumbs. And those crumbs of chametz, those breadcrumbs, those bits of bread that have fallen into the nooks and crannies of our houses have to be cleaned out too, so we can really be chametz-free, so we can really be leaven-free in our homes. That's why some people, according to tradition, use a candle and a feather to search for this kind of crumbage. It's a nod to the idea that to really abide by this mitzvah, we have to get into those little bitty corners and cracks in our homes and really seek them out in order for Passover to be upon us as we enter it clean and chametz-free. While this process may feel tedious for some, or it may feel fun and exciting for others, it has an important spiritual dimension regardless. Other rabbis have extended this idea of cleaning nooks and crannies out to apply not just to the messes that accumulate in our houses, but to a process for cleaning up other kinds of crumbs and messes during Passover, not just the ones made by real, actual breadcrumbs. If we look at the difference, for example, between a loaf of bread or a loaf of challah, leavened, and we look at matzah, that bread of the week of Passover, which is unleavened, we can see a difference in the two types of food size and shape. They have the same ingredients, but one has had time to rise, so it has gotten all puffed up. Another difference I might add is that if you eat a lot of matzah, you might feel a little fuller than if you eat a lot of bread, and I know we're looking forward to that. And in preparation for Passover, though, a new year of sorts, in the beginning of spring, we're supposed to look at this inflated bread, this puffed upness of things that we don't eat, as a symbol of how sometimes we, as human beings, have too much in our lives. We maybe have too many possessions, some of us, or maybe we have too much pride or too much stubbornness. Sometimes, our rabbis teach, we drag around more stuff than we need in our lives. And Passover is a good time to get back to basics, and that's what the matzah might represent. If we put ourselves in the place of the Israelites again, we know that they had to be very discerning about what they brought with them on their long journey because they were going to be walking the whole way, and they could only bring along what they could carry. And so we must do the same, our tradition says. So this process of chametz hunting in our houses and also in our hearts and minds suggests that we ask ourselves these kinds of questions. What things do I have too much of in my life? Do I have things in my life that don't really belong to me or that I've gotten by being dishonest or unkind? Have I made myself so big and important that I've forgotten to think about other people or about God? How can I clean out my house, my heart, my life, so that what's left is exactly who I am and who I want to be, the most fundamental and sacred part of me? These are not easy or small questions to ask ourselves, no matter how old we are. That's why we designate a special time of year, this time of year, to ask them and to devote ourselves to answering them. Today is such a magnificent day when the Jones and Brody families and all those who love them are reflecting on the absolutely essential elements of all of our lives. The spirits of Cass and Gordon, the togetherness that infuses this sanctuary, the gifts of learning and the life lessons that are being passed down, the traditions of family, the legacies. All of this is the purest reflection of who we are and who we want to be every day. It is a perfect lens through which to view the coming 2 weeks of cleaning that lies before us as a community here. Whether you take everything delicious out of your pantry or just put a little matzah or macaroons in it. The ironically beautiful part of this kind of a tradition, something that is also exemplified by this day in this moment, which is mostly about prayer and family and learning and celebrating and growing, is that by making our lives a little bit cleaner and a little bit simpler and a little bit less full, we actually make our lives fuller at the same time. And that is what we're all doing today and hopefully will continue to do in the future. Shabbat Shalom.